I would like to introduce our panelists, and then just really quickly, and then what I'm going to have them do is I want them to introduce what they do, right, at the company and what they do, but also just, based on this morning, you saw the top 10 kind of results of the survey, right, starting with, lack of role models, et cetera. So I've also asked them to, if they can pick one item in there that maybe resonated with them and why. So first we have Donald Fan, who's become my new friend. These are my new friends at Wal-Mart. And he is the Senior Director for Global Culture, Inclusion, and Diversity. We all say different. Culture, diversity, yes. Rekha Rao, who is the General Manager for Professional Oral Care at Colgate-Palmolive. And then we also have Suzzanne Yao, who's the Managing Director and Associate General Counsel at Goldman Sachs. So if we can maybe start with Donald, and if you could just talk a bit about your role, that would be great.
Donald Fan, and I born and grown up in Shanghai, China. So Shanghai is my hometown. I'm still go back and forth each year and visit my mom and my younger sisters over there. I come to United States after Tiananmen Square massacre. I'm not quite sure how many of you know about that. At that time, I was teaching college for 8 years and come to the United States for graduate studies. And upon my graduations, then I joined Wal-Mart. At that time, so Wal-Mart just opened the China operations and Indonesia operations. My plan is just to give 2 years to the company and build it up some of the corporate experiences, because my previous experiences are academia. And, after 20 years, I'm still stay with the company. And my original career plan definitely failed. But a couple of things really keep me over there. One is the culture, the corporate culture. That culture is really aligned with my value system when I brought it up. And two is it's truly a people business. And what we do on a day-to-day basis really impact the millions of the people who shop at our stores. Now, I started with Walmart in IT area. I spent 8 years in IT. By that time, I feel comfortable doing the same things every day, and I don't feel challenging anymore. That's the times I think I'm going to really step out of the box. And that's one of the challenges we talked about. And for many of our Asian people, we tend to satisfied with our status as experts or subject matter experts, or go-to person, or tech savvy, and nothing beyond that. So it can hurt and it can block our career moving forward. And then by that time, the company established the Office of Diversity. And then I decided to join that office because there's two really criteria I would like to consider when I shift my career from IT to the other areas. One is it need to be closer to our core businesses. Two is that role need to be more impactful, just sitting in the IT space. So that's why I joined the office since then. And during my tenure working in that office, I've been responsible for strategy development, different areas, the marketing, communications, external relations, and the data analytics, the business insight, and some other areas. I think that will be me. Oh, yeah.
Great. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rekha Rao, and as Sophia mentioned, I'm the general manager of our professional oral care business. I'd like to begin with my story, which really begins with my grandmother. So this is in a small town in India, a town called Mysore. She's 12 years old, she gets married, and at the age of 13, she has her first baby, and she has 10 children thereafter, one of which was my father. They lived in, somewhat impoverished conditions. My father got himself educated and ultimately came to the U.S. to do his master's and PhD, probably a similar story to many. So, I'm raised with that, and that's a huge part of my story, is the sacrifices that two generations before me made for me to be kind of where I am today. I joined Colgate 17 years ago and progressed through a bunch of different marketing roles. One that's highly formative is I led the marketing function at Colgate in India for a couple of years based on Mumbai. The reason that is so pivotal is that all my life I dreamed of kind of moving back to India. So growing up in the US, we used to go back to India quite often every summer, and I would never want to leave. And I would always think, one day I want to live here. And I thought it was going to be this really beautiful, special time. So that was always something I wanted. And so I was really happy when it actually occurred. And so I have a story to share in that space, but certainly it's very formative to who I am. In terms of some of the challenges that resonated based on those survey, the one around role models certainly is the one that did. And I guess I'll share two quick experiences around that. One is growing up in the US in the 80s and being in an environment where there wasn't a ton of diversity, certainly was a big part of what shaped me. So role models, even at that level, were quite different because they didn't look like me, which has its own challenges. And then when I fast forward to the workplace, and I think of actually even Colgate, and I think of it 15 years ago versus where we are today, it is tremendously different. And so I think about growing up in an organization that maybe didn't have as many role models at senior levels that I could connect with at a personal level, or that look like me, whether it's gender or ethnicity, that's in sharp contrast to where it is today. So I guess really proud to be part of an organization that's gone through that journey. And the theme of both is then pay it forward. So how do I now take the responsibility to be that role model to the generation ahead, and think about my family in this context and raising them in what is today a more diverse world.
Hi, everyone. My name is Suzzanne Yao, and I'm a managing director and associate general counsel at Goldman Sachs. So just a few quick things about me. I was born in Taiwan, and my family came with my two siblings and myself, like many immigrant families, right, come to America for a better life and a better education for their kids. And so I still remember coming here and being in kindergarten and literally not understanding a word of English, and just sort of having a very sink or swim sort of experience as a young child. And, my parents worked extremely hard. Again, probably, something that's familiar to a number of you, really, left me and my siblings to take care of ourselves, sort of, it wasn't that easy. We all, as kids actually also had jobs, we sort of did things that, maybe today our own kids don't do quite as much of, but it definitely taught me a lot of resilience from a very young age. And it also sort of taught me, or, it was evident to me that, today being part of Goldman was definitely not preordained. It was not sort of in the cards, and you really had to work at it. So I went to college and law school here on the East Coast. After I graduated from law school, I spent 4 years working at a law firm here in downtown. Then an opportunity opened up for me at Goldman Sachs to join the internal legal department. And I really jumped at it because I wanted to be sort of part of the action. I wanted to be in the business. I wanted direct contact and exposure to clients. I wanted to see what it was like to have to really think on my feet and really be challenged in that way. And so I really jumped at the opportunity to move in-house to Goldman, and I've been in the legal department now for 10 years. So what I do specifically is I advise the firm on the various products and services that we sell to retirement plan clients here in the US. So the reason that's important is because there's trillions of dollars held in these plans, retirement plans, pension plans, 401k plans, and there's a very specific set of rules that applies to those types of clients. So that's what I spend my time doing. That's my day job. But I'm here today also in my capacity as a co-chair of the firm-wide Asian Professionals Network here at Goldman. So I've been honored to be in this role for the last year or so. And, we have 4,600 members and counting who are opting into the Goldman Asian Professionals Network, and definitely happy to share experiences that we have. In terms of the challenges that were highlighted by the survey results, I also want to say a word about role models, which is, at Goldman Sachs, my sponsors and my mentors and my advocates, they sort of were nothing like me, actually. They didn't have the same background I did. They didn't grow up in the same city. They didn't have the same childhood experiences. They didn't go to the same schools necessarily. But they obviously saw a spark and they saw some talent, right, that they wanted to advocate for. And so sometimes I think, we do say that we want someone who looks exactly like us to look up to and to support and advocate. And I think that that's really important, but I would just encourage folks to also think about, someone who really has nothing really in common with you, but obviously sees your skill and your talent. They can be your biggest advocate.
Thank you very much. We have an excellent panel, as you can see. So we have a number of questions. They primarily will be focused on their experiences. So what I had asked them at the last panel, and I'll reiterate now, is as you answer the questions, be thinking about your story. Because I think, like many of us in this room, we can talk about kind of the 3 things we do in diversity inclusion, or the 4 things we do, right? And certainly there's differentiation by industry, but there's really differentiation by your personal story. So the first set of questions are really focused on kind of really looking at initiatives inside the company from a development standpoint, and then from a retention standpoint. And then we'll get to some of the personal stuff. We had some good stories that we would like to share with this group too. So when you think about the companies that you represent, what are some of the initiatives that you feel have been impactful from a talent management? And when I say talent management, it means everything from development, succession planning, et cetera. And kind of if you can provide a little context for maybe the role you play in that. And Reka, if we can start with you.
Sure. So at Colgate, there's a very strong talent management process. Probably like many firms in the room, it's a strong succession planning process. And there's, three aspects to it. One is at an individual level, individuals doing their individual development plan, where, it's really up to the individual to be very clear on what their long-term career aspirations are, what the short-term steps might be to get there, and what are the competencies and experiences that you would want in order to get to that career aspiration. So I think it begins with the responsibility of the individual to really crystallize that. Then it's up to the manager to really give honest feedback around what is realistic, what makes sense, so you can have a dialogue. So you're very clear that if your manager is aligned to that you have a game plan on how to achieve it. Then the third is really at a kind of senior management level. Where are the actual roles in the organization, and how does it all come together? So that's in terms of process, how it occurs. I guess specific to I think what's enriched through that is also the opportunity for global experiences or international experiences at Colgate, both at a short-term assignment level as well as a long-term assignment. So that is just a huge part of Colgate and the culture and the values of the organization. You will find, most people at Colgate will have at some point done a role outside of the U.S. So that's just a big part. So that's one aspect. And the other one is other supplemented leadership experiences. There's a very concerted effort to have kind of early in career, mid into career, and executive leadership experiences that very much foster diversity and experiences and leadership experiences. So I think all of those together are really, some of the drivers of the talent management process.
Great, thank you. So Donald, I had picked on you a little bit before. So same kind of question, but when you think about Wal-Mart, right? And you were talking about and sharing just the hiring volume, the training volume, right? I mean, it's a completely different paradigm from where I am at Medtronic. And so when you think about that, how do you look at talent management and the development of the future state of your workforce?
Okay. Yes, the size and the scale is huge. We have 2.3 million associates across the world, and we have 1.5 million U.S. only. Thinking about in the past, in the traditional old age, size is everything, and every company try to grow as bigger, as quicker as possible. Today, size can help you to a certain degree, but more likely will put you in a disadvantage pace. You won't be move fast. You won't be nimble enough. You won't be just your business models to make sure you are on the trend. Now, from the talent perspective, from a talent management perspective, I think we are thinking about, especially we're talking about the diversity and inclusion. So we are really put our core efforts into how we're going to make sure we embedded CDI, we call it CDI, culture, diversity, inclusion, and along with the talent strategy, along each of our associates' life cycle. And starting from recruiting, hiring, part of it, make sure our brand is correct, is right to attract the top talent. And it also make sure we position the company as the employer of choice. Make sure each of those positions are gender neutral. You heard earlier today. And some of the opening description, the position descriptions have a very strong muscular words. And you just pushed away the female and the woman applicants. And it also, when you get into the workforce, make sure we have the right onboarding programs in place. We have onboarding programs called Compass. It's a year-long programs, and designed to make sure our associates join the company. Their first 18 months, it's the toughest because our data tells us the highest leaving and exit rate happening in this 18 months. So we make sure we have a robust onboarding programs in place, not like the general onboarding one-day sessions. That's done with it. And we have monthly sessions getting all of those new hires together and give them the platform to share their workplace experiences, their observations, their challenges, and also attend a specific workshop, really give them the tools and the resources and help them to achieve a rewarding career at Wal-Mart. Whenever you go to the development side of it, as like all your companies have, we have all kinds of function-based training programs as well as the leadership-based training programs. In addition to it, every time we select those participants into the development programs, we make sure it's equally mixed. What I'm saying is just to make sure that people of color and the women have a high participations in those programs. And it also, when we have a succession planning, we also ensure women and the people of color, including the APA talents in the program. So this way, we have the we have this balances in place, and to drive the talent management cycles. And also we have 18-month unwritten rules. 18 months means if you're in a role, because Walmart is so big, they have so many different positions and roles. 18 months in the role, you can ask for transfer. That's where I take advantage of. And transfer, and your boss cannot say no. And unless he promotes you, right? And they give you a better pay and a better... Are you trying to... Okay, here we go.
So I want to ask Suzanne, we'll start with you. When you think about emerging practices, whether it's future workforce, current workforce, what are some of those practices you think we could share? And I preface this with not using the term best practices, because best practices may not be best practices for you, right? But what emerging practices that you could share with everybody?
So one thing that's been really successful for us at Goldman Sachs has been the focus the APN has had over the last several years on soft skills, and in particular, communication. And so I think a lot of us in this room have probably heard this before or have experienced it, right? Which is no one doubts our functional and technical capabilities and competence. However, they may say things like, well, in terms of communication style, or in terms of presence, or in terms of, being able to put him or her in front of external clients to deliver a presentation, we think maybe this person's not quite ready, or, not quite up to the standards that we're looking for. So I think especially with the Asian population, one of the things that we focused a lot on is soft skills and how our network can help our population. So one thing that's been extremely successful is we have a TED-style talk program where we will give our APN members the opportunity to go through an intensive training to deliver a TED-style talk. And this is by the Asian Professionals Network for the Asian Professionals Network. So what we do is we set ground rules, right? So TED-style talk means that you cannot read from your notes. You can't have notes with you. You can have written materials, but literally you have one PowerPoint with 3 or 4 bullets, and that's it. Ground rules are also you have to not stand behind a lectern. You have to go out and walk, right? And be mindful of your physical presence as well. And so this is a very intensive 8-week course, and it's all volunteer, right? So it's the APN who delivers the training. It's the APN members that go through the training. And at the end, they deliver a TED-style talk about the work that they do for the firm or a particular project that they're working on in a room, bigger than this, several hundred people. And I can tell you, because I've seen it with my own eyes, it makes a difference. And, I've been in meetings with folks who haven't gone through it, and then I go to meetings with the same folks who, just graduated from the program, and you can actually tell the difference. There's a difference in confidence, right? And that's a big thing, because again, I think that there's no doubting functional and technical knowledge and capability, but, confidence going into a large room and being able to deliver a presentation or being able to talk to clients is so incredibly important in all of our industries. And that's been a great success for us. We have a queue. And again, this is on top of people's full-time jobs, and it's intense. I mean, you have to show up to every coaching session, but people want to do it. They're lining up to do it because they recognize the benefits that it provides to them. So in terms of, an emerging practice, I think I would just share that with this group. The other thing that we feel very strongly about is experimenting with mentorship programs. One thing we found, and I'm sure others can agree, is that, sometimes one-on-one mentoring programs don't always work, right? I mean, sometimes it's great, but sometimes there's no chemistry, there's no click, for one reason or another, you don't end up solidifying a relationship. Just because a computer spits out, okay, you should be matched up with so-and-so, that's not necessarily going to work. So we've experimented and had a lot of success with the idea of mentorship pods. So having like 2 or 3 managing directors or partners host, a group of 7 or 8 vice presidents. And, that way you just increase the odds, right, of building a relationship there. So those are some of the practices that we've seen work well. And, obviously we constantly think about, what we should be doing to help our population. But these 2, I feel like, have been very successful.
We think about these emerging practices, which I really like that TED Talk piece. I kind of want to take that class. And I did a bit of a TED Talk quite a few years ago, and it is really intimidating, but I think it's a very humbling experience, whatever presentations you do, to get that kind of even peer feedback, right? So when you think about your emerging practices, how does that translate into retention and advancement of talent? So what are you seeing? Maybe if you wouldn't mind kind of expanding a little bit, Suzanne, on whether it's the TED Talks or the mentoring, how is that actually transacting in terms of retention and promotion?
So, at Goldman Sachs, I think that we, as a general matter, feel very good about our ability to recruit Asian talent. So if you look at, the population that we're bringing in at the analyst and the associate level, I think we all feel very good about those numbers. I think it's true the numbers can always, be better and be higher, and we shouldn't sort of no longer have rigor in that space. But as a general matter, right, I think recruiting Asian talent at the more junior levels is something that we generally feel, we do very good at and we want to continue. I think that, not only for our firm, but for a number of firms, as you get more senior, you start to see the numbers look a little bit different. So whether you call that the bamboo ceiling or you call that, whatever label you want, I think one of the things that we feel very strongly about is, when you look at, for example, the ascension from VP, Vice President, to MD, Managing Director, that is a very, very important inflection point for the careers of our Asian population. And we recognize that, and we know how important it is to ensure that Goldman Sachs not just recruits, Asian talent, but can develop and promote Asian talent. So at the VP to MD level, we do have a program. It's the Asian Talent Initiative. And what it involves our Asian partners at the firm. So why do we involve them? Well, it's because they're in the room when the decisions are made, right? Who gets promoted? They are in the room. And we all know that if you're not in the room, then you basically, can't effectuate anything. So we work on our Asian partners getting to know the Asian pipeline of VPs, for example. So when it comes time for folks to be in a room, the senior most leaders of the firm, and they're going through the Facebooks and they're trying to make these very hard decisions about who to promote, we want our Asian partners to know the Asian VPs that are in the pipeline. So we do that through the network. We do that with the help of our talent development team. And it's something that we believe very strongly in, because how can that person advocate for you if they don't know you? I mean, sure, you can say, well, we have the same skin color, but that's not enough. And it's about going beyond that. So they have to know you and know enough about you to advocate for you, because they are the ones that are in the room. So that's something that we're also working on.
Great, thank you very much. So we want to switch gears just a little bit, still staying professional, but we want to get a little deeper, right? So, when you think about your careers and you think about the progression that you've had, what are some of those key moments that have really shaped your career? And so I know that we talked a little bit at the beginning, I know Reka, I'll talk to you for a moment, a little bit about your, history, your ancestry. You talked about wanting to go back to India. How has that maybe between culture, identity, shaped your kind of career progression?
Sure. I'll share two stories that really do shape me. So I'll take you to a day in second grade where I took Indian food to lunch for the first time, right? I took Indian food, I ate it, and I got made fun of really badly. And that was the first and last day that I ever took Indian food to school. And so I share that story because it's interesting, because I'm now in a community that's literally a mile away from that, the same, very similar school district, where now 1 day a week, everybody in the school is served Indian food in the formal lunch program. So I guess, really formative for multiple reasons. One is growing up in that world made me resilient and kind of overcome those challenges and very much who I am. But now as I think about my children and raising them in the world, it's very different. And they are growing up somewhat in a bubble, actually, because we're fortunate enough to live in this suburb where it is very diverse, and that diversity is seemingly accepted, and everyone on the surface seems to really like each other. But, they're not being raised to actually know overt racism, which is a good thing, but it's not to say it doesn't actually exist. So, I think that tension is one that's really, really important to recognize. So that's one story. The other really personal story is that, as I mentioned, I always wanted to move back to India. It was this void in me that I wanted to fill. I felt like I had missed out somehow, that I wanted to be a part of that again. So I was very clear always at Colgate that I actually wanted a role in India, and I was very clear about that, and that opportunity did come. So me, my husband, my kids, we moved there, and I had rosy glasses. I thought it was going to be the most amazing experience to be back in the home country. And at a professional level, it certainly was. It was a mind-blowing, awesome experience. But at a personal level, it was actually quite challenging. And I think what was interesting about that is it's because when I walked on the street and all local Indians saw me, looked at me, saw how I walked, talked, and recognized there's nothing Indian about me. And then on the reverse, I was seeing, expats all around me, meaning foreigners, meaning like not Indian, and I was desperate to make friends. And for them, they looked at me and they saw an Indian. And so for 2 years, we lived actually without making any friends, because it was this tension of kind of being in these in-between worlds. So that was really kind of also very formative. Connected with that experience is in my rosy eyeglass world, I thought, my children and us, we were going to gain all this culture, right? We're going back to the home country. My children are going to just learn so much. My parents who, are in the US had this wonderful vision of us connecting with culture and religion and festivals. And 1 month in, we, FaceTime my dad, and he saw his 6-year-old granddaughter and was like, what have you learned? And what she could share was singing an Indian song called Sheila Ki Jawani, where the words is, I'm too sexy for you. And so, as I reflect on that, it was really that, upbringing, culture, values, it can happen anywhere, and it's about the home, and it's about, what you can teach. It's not necessarily the environment. And so I had this vision of India and living there being the solution to filling this void, when in reality, we were doing just fine doing it ourselves, family upbringing. So those would be, kind of a big part of who I am now, because I walk in and what I am is, and it's South Asian American, and I'm proud of it, and it's just fundamental to who I am. And I think the beauty of it at Colgate specifically is, given that it's actually, a big part of the business, a well-respected part of the business, there's actually kind of positive associations with people of Asian descent, because we actually have very successful businesses there. We have successful people. And so it actually creates a fairly positive, virtuous cycle that it's actually kind of an honor to be a part of.
I want to see your dad's face on that FaceTime.
Mortified.
Right?
Mortified.
Because as soon as you said that, I looked at another Hindi speaking friend, and okay,
He was
great,
hoping for
love it.
religious,
I don't know if your kid's going to hang out with my kid, but no, I'm just kidding. So Donald, I don't know if you have quite that kind of story, but tell us a little bit about you've got such a fascinating background, and I really want folks here to hear it. I'm very humbled when I hear your story. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with the group here.
Yeah, I think I have a couple of, let's say it's a career lessons and the life lessons learned. And one is, I think, it's in my early days and during the Cultural Revolution. I'm not quite sure how many of you are familiar or heard about that. And it's in 60s. In the middle of the 60s, it's a political chaos. At that time, all the schooling closed, and there's no university, college, and any even elementary school and high school has been closed. So my formal schooling stopped at the seventh grade, and then a few years later, in the middle of the Cultural Revolutions, and all the middle school, hundreds and millions, not 100 millions, I would say 100,000 of the middle school graduates were sent down to the countryside, the remote rural area of China. And I'm from Shanghai, the most developed city is 2,000 miles away, and in a very remote, poor village with 8 of my classmates. In those days is quite a bit experiences because you subject to the long day labor and 12 to 14 hours a day, no weekends, no tap water, and no electricities. And I see myself, this kind of your situations shouldn't be stay long. And so what I decided to do is after those long days, I asked my parents, my father at the time is a surgeon and my mother is a gynecologist. And I asked them to ship me the textbook from 8th grade to the 12th grade. And also some of the learning materials along with it. So after those long days, I'm going to teach myself about what's left over. And a couple of years later, when the Cultural Revolution stopped, and it also the college and the universities resumed, I'm lucky enough get enrolled, pass the entry examinations. At that year's, the entry examination enrollment rate is 6%. So I feel very lucky to get there, but the life lesson to me is you need to be the owner of your life, of your career. You cannot be a follower, right? It doesn't matter what kind of situations you are in, and especially in those adversary situations. And you've got to be persistent. I didn't really learn that lessons consciously, not had planned, but it teaches me a lot. Even every day today, I ask myself, do I own my situations? And there's a 10-90 rule. You heard 10% of a life made up of what happened to you. You cannot control. You cannot manage. But 90% your life is determined by how you react to those situations. And that you can make a difference. Thank you. Thanks. The other very quick career lessons related, several years ago, and my supervisor approached to me and said, we are planning to promote you to a new position. And, I don't know how I'm going to reject that. And I told her, I'm not ready. I don't feel like I have enough experience to handle that kind of responsibilities. Can you give me a little bit of time? More time. You know what? Opportunity comes and goes. If it's skipped, you will never get it. If I took it, I can learn from it. And especially for the Asian peoples, I think we are competent enough. So my advice is that don't give up those rare opportunities. Grab it.
Wow. That's fantastic, see. I was waiting for a mic drop. That moment. So, Suzanne, I want to ask you, just listening to Donald, it makes me think about kind of career readiness. There's a lot of discussion, whether it's coming from the Lean In book, right? And, readiness. When are women ready? Why don't women advance further? Et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just curious, when I listen to your story, again, all the stories incredibly inspiring. How do you look at readiness? And whether it's at Goldman or just, professionally to a lot of the folks I look at in the audience who might be curious about what that might mean.
So my own personal experiences, I'm a lawyer at Goldman Sachs. So my job is basically to say no, when I need to say no. I mean, I am a control officer. My duty to the company, to our shareholders, right, is to say no a lot of the times. And so, if I let gender stereotypes or, ethnic stereotypes impact how I do my job, that would not be a good thing. So for me, being an Asian American, being a woman, and, especially starting out at Goldman, being relatively young, you're putting an environment where, your job is to say no. And it could be to a very senior trader, it could be to a very senior person, and their whole goal in life is to get that trade done. They've been working on that trade, their client wants that trade to happen. So for me, it was about and continues to be about communication. And, if I was passive or if I was reticent or I was spooked, right, in those situations, then I wouldn't be successful. So, I had to very quickly, right, appreciate that this is my job. This is what they hired me for. So I'm going to be forceful, right? I'm going to be to the point, because you can't talk to traders for more than X number of minutes without starting to lose their attention. But those are communication skills that you do have to develop. So for me, it was about, being forceful, being concise, but also, and this is where the EQ comes in, understanding that this is important, right? It could be important to your internal client. A lot of times it's important to our external client. And so part of no is also understanding what it is that they're really trying to accomplish, right? What is the trade at issue, and coming up or trying to come up with solutions or alternatives. And so to me, that's a big part as well of how to be successful, not just in my company, but really across the board. I mean, you do have to have, EQ, because I can tell you if, I deliver the message differently, I won't have a partnership with my clients, right? Like, there's always a balance when you're a control officer between being the police and being a partner. And you need a balance of both, I think, to be successful in a control type function. And again, we are not the revenue generators for the firm. So it's very important, I think, to understand your role. So for me, communication and, making sure that I am confident enough to, be able to basically advise my clients competently. And then the other thing about communication is, for me at least, communicating to the clients sort of the answer, right? Because I'm a technical expert, I know what the answer is. I was able to really hone that and exert that. But that is also a very different skill set than being able to communicate your own career goals to your manager, right? To me, those are completely different things. So I could be very successful and be very good about, working with my clients, making sure that, I'm sort of able to give them sound advice. But communicating your goals, your personal goals, your career goals to your manager is an entirely different story and challenge. And I think that, it's important to focus on both of those things, not just one or the other. So at Goldman Sachs, one thing that we've done that's been very good, and I've been the beneficiary of it, is we had a program called Emerging Leaders Program. I went through it. And one of the things that they did is they actually had a outside consultant come in and basically have me fill out a questionnaire about what my career goals were, what I wanted for myself at Goldman, where my 5-year plan was. And then they had my manager fill out the same exact questionnaire, assuming he was me, he was trying to put himself in his shoes and trying to fill out the questionnaire from my perspective. And then what the consultant did is just overlap the two, right, and see where were the gaps. And then we had a session where this person went through so that I didn't necessarily have to go through all of that with him myself. There was help just to open that door. Because again, I was very reticent initially, and that just helped open the conversation, open the door to that conversation. And from there, it became so much easier. So some programs like that, I think, can also make a really big difference.
Thank you so much. So, Reka, as we can just finish this portion, and we have 15 minutes, thank you very much, is Reka, you and I were talking this morning, and I just wanted to share when we talk about personal things, I was on the phone and needed to call my kids and check in on my son's soccer game and this and that, and we were talking about kind of the constant question of work-life balance. And how do we do that, right? It's always asked about every panel, or people are maybe reluctant to ask. So, Reka, how would you approach that? I mean, I hate to say advice, but how do you do it? I know how I do, and it's not always easy, but I'd love to hear from you and have you share that.
Yeah, I guess, I'll begin by it's highly personal, right? Everyone has their own approach that is incredibly customized and specific to each solution. I guess one piece of advice or kind of a narrative that I like to share with women at Colgate, at least, if you want to work and have a family, if that's an active choice, make it an active choice. It's not a passive decision. It should be an active decision that says there's choices I'm going to make both at work and personal to make it work. And I guess as I've gone through the years, I think it's sometimes easy to say, what do I need in my work to make it work? Do I need a flexible arrangement? Do I need to work from home? How do I reduce my working hours? And I think sometimes it's easy to solve for it there. But I guess my passion has been, how do I actually solve for it at a personal level, right? So how do I have the right childcare set up? When I got to baby number 2, it was a cleaning lady once a week. This year, as my travel has increased, I have a cook who comes and cooks Indian food for us every week. And so I solve for it in different ways because I think it's really easy to obviously get overwhelmed by it all. It's not easy at all. So I'm always a believer on, if you want to do both, how do you actually solve for it? And that solution might involve money, right? But at the end of the day, if you're doing this because you want to and you have passion for it, then there's compromises that you need to make along the way, and you just need to be really mindful of it. Make it obviously with your partner and your whole family set up. But I think all too often it's kind of easy to take a slightly passive approach, and it's really easy to get overwhelmed and want others to solve for you sometimes. And I'm a big believer that no one's going to solve for it except for yourself. And so finding those solutions that work for you is incredibly important. And I think as kids grow older, actually having them be part of the solution as well. And so, I know as my daughter's now 12, she's part of my solution. I've had to kind of have the conversation with her that says, listen, I need you to actually step up in order for me to be successful. And it works. One story is, when I got this current role as the GM of professional oral care, I don't think there was anybody happier than my daughter. And that moment to me was so fulfilling and actually drove me even further to say, I'm going to find a way to make this work, because if I can make it work in front of her, then she has to believe that she can do anything that she wants to do herself.
So much. I really wanted to share that because when that question is asked, it's always, first of all, it's only a female thing, but it actually is an inclusive discussion because it includes everybody in this room who either is a caregiver, whether it's children or not, or whatever you have going on outside of work. You have to find a way to make it work. The company's not going to tell you what to do. And so I really appreciate that because, and also be unapologetic, right, Reka? I was joking about, I have someone who does my laundry and cleaning and such. Well, you know what? I don't have time for it and I've got to pick my battles. And I want to be a role model to my kids. So they've seen me work through some really tough times. And I have a 14-year-old daughter and I have a 10-year-old son. And it's important. And they're excited. They're excited that I'm here. Mom, take a photo. Mom, where are you? You're in New York? Well, I'm not playing. Although this is this is my playtime. This is my playtime. So I'd like to open it up for questions. I think we've got 10 minutes. So please ask questions. Do you have the microphone in the back? And before you ask, I would like to make sure that we thank our panelists because, everybody's incredibly busy. And I hope that you find what they shared, inspiring. Hopefully you take something away from that. So yes, please.
Thank you, everybody. This has been an amazing session and learned a lot from each of your experiences. I'm Raghu and I'm from MasterCard. My question is, most of us have opportunities. So this is a follow-up to what you said, Donald. When an opportunity comes to you, right, and it's basically you are given a leadership role, or it's something that is about to get you to a leadership role, and you've been so far, told what to do. Now it's your role to actually embrace it and kind of define what needs to be done. So how did you evolve from a role of taking or getting to know what to be done to actually envisioning it, and explaining and helping your team to do the next steps? How was that evolution?
Yeah, I think it is one of the things I think I just mentioned earlier is don't fear, don't be scared if there's an opportunity to come to your way, and have the courage to say yes. Then you can really learn it. Now there's also a couple of I would say preconditions. Preconditions is you've got to commit it. You've got to commit it to more work. You could be bombarded, overwhelmed by the new roles because of the lack of the knowledge and the skill sets, and you need to build new teams, learn from every one of your new team members. That all means a lot of hard work, dedication, and your commitment. Now, when you have those, then you definitely can just take it over, and then learn from it. When I say learn from it, you need to have those kind of qualities to evolve, to be the master of what you've been doing. One is you need to have this mindset of learning. This mindset of learning is have a baby mindset, and open to everything, be curious, and not just curious about what I have been asked to do. Curious about what the other teams we work collaboratively are doing, how we interact to each others, and what's the skill sets, competencies required for those surrounding teams and the peoples, especially the peoples with the specific, that's the go-to persons. Learn from them. This way you have a more broader base to play. And if there's another new opportunities coming up, because you have a big picture in your mind, your knowledge and skills are not narrowed down to a specific. So that's why part of the reasons for this new age, a generalist quality is much better than a specialist quality. So that's the one of the things, the quality you need to have. The other quality you need to have is some of the people skills you need to learn to build. And the one of the three top skills by 2020, one is the let me sure I still recall it or remember it. Number one is a sense maker. You need to see the different dots. There's no hidden links. There's a hidden, but you see the linkage among them. Second one is the social intelligence. You need to dedicate it to build the network first. So you will have people share the common interest. Second, build audience. That's the cohort who would like to give you a feedback and share with you their thoughts. So you have a kind of brainstorming sessions with them. The next is the building the communities, the people willing to spread your words, spread your ideas, and your thought processes. I think those are very critical. Also answer your questions about the readiness for the new coming up leaders. We need to definitely think differently because the industry and the business shift so fast.
Question.
Thanks. Hi, so my name is Michael Bai, work at GE. So your stories have been, very inspirational, and that they actually resonate as things that either I've lived through or maybe like my parents' generation have lived through. My dad lived through the Cultural Revolution as well. One thing that I hadn't thought of before, Dr. Mahmood Khan had mentioned it, and Reka, you mentioned it too, which is that our next generations kind of are fortunate enough not to have to live through those things. But regardless, those have been learning experiences for you. So what do we need to do to make sure that next generation is instilled with the same level of work ethic or motivation to do better than we have, or continue to do better?
It's at a really personal level, I think it's about sharing the stories and sharing like where they come from. So I think, having that sense of understanding of kind of the generations before them and their stories, I think is profoundly important. I guess the other piece is, I think, because diversity in this context versus then is just really different. So more it's about embracing a different way of thinking. So perhaps now, different kind of visual looks are more accepted, but still different thinking can still be challenged in school. Peer pressure continues, bullying continues. So I think the underlying issues are there. So in fact, in some regard, them being able to cope with these things, it's still the similar life skills that ultimately need to get taught in terms of resilience and confidence and being, not kind of able to be pressured by others. But I think the context looks a little different. So, I think it's still not, it's not like seventh grade is easy now, right? It's probably actually harder with social media and just it's just the context is highly different. So maybe for us, it's much more about it was our heritage and it was how we looked. That was the challenge. Now the challenge is incredibly different, but I think what they need to learn is the same, which is be confident, stay your ground, be resilient, and stay strong to who you are and what you believe in. So I think that's kind of how I'm navigating it. And then the stories of the upbringing and the context of the culture and the stories of what they both have come from.
Any other questions? Quiet group, this one. So just wanted to share one thing. It's interesting. We had a question in the last group around parenting advice. And if you recall that, and it was, what do we teach our kids? So we're all here, we're professionals, regardless of tenure and what we do. But now what do we teach, whether it's children, whether you have children or not, but children in your lives, right? So I'm going to ask the audience, because we had some thoughts, but I'm curious what the audience, how you would respond to. So now what do we do with the next generation? So yes, please. I knew I could count on you.
I have a 19-year-old, and we all know that the African-American experience is different, but it's still an experience that is challenging, as we all have had as immigrants. What I'm very, very disappointed as I try to look at the youth today, at least from an African American perspective, is the fact that in some respects I think they have it too good, because what I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years at a really, really high level is a sense of apathy that because we're in such a great country, that apathy does not or has not affected them the way maybe it should. And so over generations, you start to get to a point where it's almost like, I go and visit a lot of the African-American inner cities, and it just disappoints me that they don't know who, the great inventors are, or the people who, are in government, or the people who, pioneered. But they could tell me all of the musicians and all of the athletes. And I just get a little disappointed, maybe in us sometimes, where we just don't pound it into their heads, because they need to know it, and they need to know what it was in order to make it better and to understand that they are blessed to have what it is. So that's my only thing is we got, it's great. We make it better for them than it was for us, but we got to go back. We got to take them back, and we got to put them in front of what we came from if we're going to really have them understand what they need to do.
Yes, please.
So I have two sons. They're probably older than all of you guys in the room. So I'm here because I'm reinventing myself. So I just want to observe and listen. As Asian Americans, we face constantly the model minority image. I think oftentimes our younger generation don't truly, as this gentleman said, don't truly understand the history, where it came from, how it impacts you as an individual, and how it impacts you in your career. So the panelists, what they've said in terms of all the advices that they've given you are so on point, because it really reflects who you are and what you project outside. So for a lot of the young people in here, as you said, how much of your own history do you know? How have you been embracing yourself and your community? How engaged are you in your own community? How many of you are registered voters? How many are you involved in civic engagement? So I think we have a lot of work to do. As a mother and a grandmother, I'm constantly reminding my children, you were not born with a silver spoon in your mouth. There are things that we need to do. We need to advance our community. So as all these young people in the room here, I think it's time that if you're not involved in something, get yourself involved, get engaged in something that is meaningful and that will give voice to our community.
Thank you for that. And I think that's interesting. I mean, that's exactly, I think, where we started to go earlier. Part of it was we started talking about things like teaching our kids that, or whoever you have in your life, right, that failure is okay. Like, you got to learn to get up again. And that, maybe for me as a mother, it's not about coddling, my son or my daughter, and helping them understand. And I joke, I'm like, I'm a typical like Indian mom sometimes, where I'm like, hey, don't you mess around, but exactly that point around the silver spoon, right? Is that, we may be doing well. And I think collectively, if I look at this room, we've just got an incredible room of leaders here. Leadership is not about being a director. Leadership is about what position you're in and what you do. So to your point about advocacy and getting engaged, I was really appreciated.
All right, I just wanted to comment, my path towards Asian awareness happened late in my career, but I have two kids, and one of them, and they're both born and raised in New York City. So, and one of them ended up going to one of the competitive high schools. So, so I come back and I always say, I'm going to an Ascend event, and I'm involved with, the diversity thing in IBM, and so on and so forth. And my son, who went to Stuyvesant, he would say, look, the school is 70% Asian. Have no idea what you're talking about. And I said, well, we talk about issues that the baggage that we carry and, the cultural things that hold us back. And then I try to describe it. And he says, well, in my environment, some of the most aggressive people I met are all Asian. So for him and my daughter, it's kind of like they don't really see the need. I think they don't really sense it. And I don't want to become political, but I think this whole thing with the recent election and, just the other day I was walking down the street with my wife and I bump into this guy near Tiffany's. And then, I was a little pissed. So I said, why don't you watch where you're going? And then he just blurted out, why don't you go back to Japan? And I was about to say, well, first off, actually, and then give him a geography lesson. But, I thought better of that. And I thought, well, that was a fact check. So I think my message to my kids is as much progress as we think we've made, it's really a facade in some cases. And what's been revealed recently is how people really think. And I think there's much work to be done. And that's one thing we need to instill in our kids. So, they operate in a little bit of a bubble, but, once you get out of it, we start to see the world as it really is.
That comment, and I know we're wrapping up. We got like 10 seconds, right? I keep it. More seconds, please. I think you raise a good point, and I think it's interesting when you come to conferences like this, or you engage in dialogue. I mean, certainly, we can talk about diversity of thought, which we do, which we know we value, but there is a reality there, and I always talk about kind of the underbelly of any organization. So there's a lot of things we still some room for progress, right? But having these kinds of dialogues and engaging together is an important contribution. So thank you very much. Panelists, thank you all so much.